Today, I want to talk about gaslighting. Why gaslighting is important and interesting is because the narrative always seems to be changing. It makes us almost question sometimes what we believe, because we might hear one story one day and then hear a different story the next day and wonder, how do those two stories even make sense? How do those two stories exist together at the same time? And gaslighting is a form of psychological manipulation in which a person or group covertly sows seeds of doubt in a targeted individual or group, making them question their own memories, perceptions, or judgments. And generally, the goal or the purpose is to destabilize or make someone question their sanity, make people question their understanding, make people sort of doubt what they believe. And often it's used in abusive relationships where the abuser will target their victim. So the victim doubts themselves, but the abuser is using this or doing this so that they can have more control and power over the other person. This is also a thing that sociopaths and narcissists use. Sort of a big reason why they might use gaslighting is because that's an easy way for them to gain more power, for them to gain more dominance over their victims. In a sort of a relationship or a romantic relationship, regular relationship, someone might use gaslighting to keep the other person in the relationship, to control the relationship. But the general goal or purpose of it is to create cognitive dissonance. It's to make someone have two contradictory ideas. So, in a relationship, someone might think, well, my partner's a really terrible person, but I still love them. I still want to be with them. Other things would be I don't believe in this thing, but I'm going to do it anyways. Some interesting signs of gaslighting is that someone might withhold information. You pretend that there's only one side to an argument, pretend that there's only one view, pretend that the consensus on something is one thing where there's actually some doubt, there's actually some debate, there's actually some disagreement. The abuser is always going to sort of manipulate the other person's responses or views or actions to fit their sort of narrative, to fit their sort of objective, to fit their position of power in the relationship. They might do this also by discounting, information. There's an abusive relationship. The person might say, well, my sibling, my sister, my brother says that you're really mean to me. And then be like, well, your sibling is just jealous of us. They don't have the same relationship as us. Another thing could be blocking alternative sources of information. In a relationship, if someone wanted to talk to their family, then the abuser might say, well, you know what? I don't know that you should talk to them right now because, they haven't been nice to us, or there's always an excuse. There's always a reason why this kind of thing can't happen. Another thing too is trivializing and undermining the positions of the victim, or the concerns, the values, the points of the victim. And so there's always this making those things, pretending those things don't matter, saying that they're insignificant, saying that they're not a factor, saying that they don't matter. And a great example of this was Girl on the Train. So if you've read the book or seen the movie, in that movie, there's this woman and she kind of has these memories about the past. Her ex-husband always blamed her for things, and he would say she misremembered because she was drunk, but then he was actually the one who was doing all the bad stuff. But he was convincing her that she was actually doing the bad stuff. And so it's just about manipulation, about changing someone's perceptions of what's happened in the past and making them think that a different sort of situation transpired, a different sort of series of events occurred in opposed to what actually happened. And it's always for the benefit of the abuser. But seeing as I've talked about this in the context of relationships, it's kind of interesting to think about it in the context of real life. And when you watch TV or you watch the news or you consume stuff on social media, it feels to me, it feels sometimes there's 24/7 gaslighting. There's 24/7 making us doubt our memories, making us doubt what we thought we knew yesterday, today. An event happens and then you hear stories about it, and then you start to wonder what actually was that thing that I first heard? Is it even the same thing anymore? A big way that this happens is when the media presents a story or an event, it's always going to be filled with the political biases of the party. It's going to be filled with their sort of narratives and their agenda, and they're going to look at the same event and they're going to have two different interpretations, because one interpretation sort of fits one narrative and the other interpretation fits another narrative. And while the event could be exactly the same, you have these two almost seemingly contradictory explanations or understandings of what happened. And so this can kind of create a sense of there's this like gaslighting is occurring, because like you hear one thing one day and then the events or the story changes the next day, and then you can start to makes you wonder like, well, what happened yesterday? Like what happened before? Like is what I remember actually accurate? Is it actually what happened, or like am I misremembering? And so it always sows the sort of seeds of doubt within us. If we consume media all every day, then almost by necessity we're going to have this sort of sense of confusion, because we're going to be having these sort of different stories fed to us every day. And I would say too that like politicians use this all the time, and so maybe they might like describe something that happened in the past, and they could change the story to make it seem like sort of they were the victim or that they were the hero, even though maybe it wasn't actually the case. And anytime that someone has like sort of a platform, they have the ability to be in a position to speak and to like talk to the sort of audience, then they always have the opportunity, if they're given the platform, to manipulate or to try and change the way that people perceive what's happened in the past. There's enough evidence to suggest, you know what, like sometimes the news, like even respectable places like the New York Times, report stories that are completely false. And so like it's difficult to know for sure what's actually happening, because the quality of journalism has appears to be fading. And then at the same time though, like we have all these other sources of sort of journalism or information sharing that doesn't maybe have the same standards as like a sort of a top of the pyramid news organization would. There's always motivations. There's always motivations of different parties to influence the way that we perceive things. And so there's always like a motivation to tell a story in a way that doesn't necessarily contradict the facts, but presents those facts in a different way. And if enough of this is happening, then it creates this sort of strange confusion and distinction between like what's actually there and what's not. And at the same time though, right, like there can be other countries, there can be other parties where like they want to sow these seeds of doubt in the populace, because that is going to create like a sort of a power opportunity for them. Another thing too is like on social media, there's so many memes, right? And it depends on who your friends are online, but like maybe you're going to be seeing a whole bunch of memes that are memes about the same thing, but from different perspectives, from different sort of positions. And so they might seem to be saying something different than what is actually the event, and that can become confusing. That can create this sort of inability to make sense of different pieces of evidence. Like I kind of hinted at before, I think this is more of like an emergent property. Like I don't think that there's actually anyone who's out there trying to gaslight us, but it just sort of happens because there's so many sources of information with so many different biases, so many different influences, so many different motivations, and just like, you know, they're all focusing on the same facts, but the facts are only a small part of the story. And so some people decide, like some groups will decide to ignore some facts, and others will just focus on some facts. And so this like creates this idea, it creates this feeling of like confusion, about doubt, about like, you know, you like might watch something and like think like, what about what I saw just yesterday? I thought it was the opposite of this. But I think kind of the point here though is that like, because there's so much confusion that we get fed every single day in all the media that we consume, it's really important to have like this solid foundation. You need to have like a solid understanding of things. And, you know, for me, I kind of feel a little bit like media is mostly fictional. And so like I kind of look at things with the lens of all of these stories are fake. All of these stories aren't true. There might be aspects of truth to them, but I kind of have this view to automatically sort of default to not really believing them, because they're most likely going to be a whole bunch of factors that are contributing to why that isn't an accurate story. So like what's really important from the perspective of someone trying to make sense of this is like standing back and realizing that all these factors are influencing the information that's coming to you. And so you have to kind of be careful to understand it, to filter it, and to get rid of the stuff that's junk. And so that's kind of what I think about gaslighting. And it does certainly feel like sometimes that there's like this force that's trying to like make us doubt ourselves. Like it seems like an emergent property. It seems like it's just a result of the plethora or like all the sources of information that are available to us. And it kind of makes it confusing. It makes it harder to follow stories, especially if we consume different sources. So click that like button if you found this interesting or entertaining. Click that subscribe button if you're curious about learning how to think, but you don't want to be told what to think. This is Making Sense with Robbie. Thanks for watching, and we'll talk to you next time. Goodbye.